Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market, where every day we discuss everything to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make some or a lot of money on the internet. Loaded up for discussion today. We have the Fed's largest, or not the largest, a large rate cut of 50 basis points. It's had a muted market reaction, but crypto majors are up. Bitcoin's up 4% to 62K. ETH is up 5% to 2.4K. Solana is plus 6% to 138. Solana second gen smartphone sells 140,000 on pre-sale, generating $70 million. And finally, Yuga Labs workshop team announces the first workshop team production top trader, where you can blow out multiple accounts with 1000x leverage. We'll dive into some of the details there in just a little bit. We've also got all the latest on price action on crypto and NFTs as usual, plus some discussion on relative value on ETH, Bitcoin, and punks with some very, very interesting statistics. So stay tuned for that. Today, we have Legendary in the co-host seat and Bread in the literal seat next to me.
Co-pilot seat. I'm in the co-pilot seat today.
In the co-pilot seat, in the physical location. If you are listening in on audio, you might want to check this situation out that we have on video. Remember, we're live on X video, live on YouTube video too. This will be a funny one. I don't know if it actually will be a funny one, but practically it's an interesting thing at a minimum. So we're going to get into all of that. But before we do, just a reminder, friends, that nothing that we say here should be considered financial advice, because the market is very risky and we don't know anything for sure. How can we know anything for sure? Look at Brad. He's got a, what's this kind of hat you've got? He's got a cowboy hat wrapped around his neck.
People don't know that. For people that are just listening, I have a sun hat. I can fold it up, make it look like a little Crocodile Dundee thing. Honestly, it's blistering out here, so I'm doing whatever I can to defend myself. Day 3, it's a lot.
It looks like he's hunting for crocodiles. You can't take financial advice from someone who is doing that. So please do bear that in mind. Proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment, as Brett is when he is searching for crocodiles. With that out of the way, Legendary, how are you doing? It is Thursday. It's the 19th of September. What's going on with you?
GM doing quite well. Also worthwhile noting that Brett is showing more skin while he is in Singapore, showing more of the artwork on his skin. So definitely tune in.
You're trying to get a bump in the ratings there, Legendary. You think that's gonna get people over to the video?
Look, I know that Brett's more like adult content does very, very well, and now that we have the chance of seeing more of his skin on show, I'm just gonna leverage that for max engagement. It's as easy as that.
Yeah, we're on the road, which means the 70-30 ratio is flipped on its head. I got more skin and butt pics than I do content on the analytical front.
Look, just because this is a later night show in Singapore, it doesn't mean that the content's going to skew in that direction necessarily. Like, it's 7 p.m. out here. This is still well before anything that where your imagination is taking you guys. So look, that's going to be an interesting point of discussion for a bit. We're going to get into all of the news as usual. But yeah, it's fun doing this kind of live situation. We're going to catch up again, just so like we did yesterday, a few more learnings and insight from what's been going on in Singapore, and then we will hit the usual headlines and price action. So let's just get to it right away, starting with the price action. We have Bitcoin is up 4% at 62.3K. You've got ETH up 5% to 2.4K, with Solana up again, outperforming everything else, up 7% to $138. Getting into the headlines themselves, as we noted, the Fed's large rate cut of 50 basis points has had a kind of muted market reaction, but the crypto majors are up. Solana second gen smartphone selling for $140,000 on pre-sale, generating $70 million. Tyler reported a bit more in detail on that. It said that's 5x the demand of the original Saga phone, which, remember, a lot of us bought for the airdrops, which were quite lucrative for a period of time before stopping. And then finally, Yuga Labs workshop team announced their first workshop team production called Top Trader. They say you can blow out multiple accounts with 1000x leverage in the pursuit of crypto rewards.
Is that a sales pitch? Is that really a sales pitch? That doesn't seem like a value prop to me.
It sounds like a dangerous game for sure. One which may entice some people to play. So We'll discuss that a little bit later in the show as well. Getting into some notable sales. Xcopy, Echoes of Dead Earth, selling for 36.36 ETH. That's pretty significant. Again, Xcopy bot is on fire as usual. CryptoPunk Big Shades selling for 31.95 ETH, and an Azuki Elementals Buckethead trait sold for 5.94 ETH. That was one of the more entertaining notable sales that I noticed today. That's the headlines and the price action. Legendary, let's head over to our NFT marketplace partner, Mintify, to see what else is going on in the NFT market.
Absolutely. There's quite some interesting stories coming from the JPEG side today, but let's start with the big collections first. We have Bored Apes down a touch, down 3% at a 11.6 ETH floor. We have Azuki's down 1%, basically managing to maintain most of the pump that they enjoyed and still sitting at a 5.63 ETH floor. Pudgy's down 2.6%, 10.6 ETH floor for them. Milady's basically unchanged from yesterday, still at a 3.36 ETH floor. DGOT's continuing the downtrend, down another 10% at a 1.35 ETH floor. And the last collection that I picked is the Flyfish Club. We discussed it on one of the shows. They've been fined by the SEC. I think it was a 750K fine. Also, they've been ordered to destroy all of the NFTs that are still in their possession and to stop charging royalties. On the day that the news broke, the NFTs dumped 10%. I think they back then were like at a 1.4, 1.3.
Deflationary mechanics, Legendary. That's bullish.
Deflationary mechanics are kicking in. Exactly. Supply cut enforced by the SEC led to a 48% pump on the day over the last 24 hours and took the collection to a 1.75 ETH floor. So I think
this can't be true. Literally, because they've been ordered to destroy them, the value's gone up by 50%. Is that really?
But you said that yourself. If the SEC is not fining you, you're not relevant enough. You just don't matter in the grand scheme of things. So this is bullish, yeah.
Wow. Okay. I think we did say that, right? Like if you're not in the game, then you're not.
I mean, I want one. I want one. If they're literally ordered to destroy these things and they have to like hunt them down or do whatever they can, dude, that kind of makes me want one. That's that's natural, I think, as a human.
I think they only need to destroy the JPEGs that are in their possession. They don't need to go on a JPEG hunt, but still, it's a deflationary mechanism nonetheless.
Correct. I can almost guarantee that people will have read that that they need to destroy the JPEGs, and then they're thinking, well, why don't I buy the JPEGs so that they have to buy it off me in order to be able to destroy it? But this is actually like a common thing that happens in law, where as part of like dispute resolution, you'll get told specifically destroy the stuff, but the things that are in your possession, because in the end, ultimately, you can only be held responsible for the things that are in your possession. And sometimes you might be asked to like go out and ask someone like, look, can you provide this thing? Maybe we sent it to you by mistake, but we're supposed to delete it. But usually it's just like in your possession.
So that's interesting. Like, so I know burning things inside of crypto is a little different with smart contracts. Like, I wonder if in the actual smart contract they even like made a burning method or instituted the burning method, or they just have to send them off into the ether, like some contracts, right? Like apes can't be burned, punks can't be burned, not in the literal sense where the token's destroyed. They just got to like send it to the zero address. I wonder which of those two options they have at their disposal.
Any thoughts on that?
I could dig it up if I had the Etherscan contract, but yeah, it's inconsequential. It's just curious for me as a nerd.
Interesting stuff. So that's pretty interesting price action there. What else are you looking at in the NFT market, Legendary? Anything else that's exciting you? Anything else that's catching your attention? And then maybe Brad will bring you in on that question before we hit the pretty interesting stats I've got on punks, ETH, and Bitcoin. Little discussion to have there in a moment.
Yeah, I stumbled upon a post by ICO Beast yesterday, and ICO was saying that Peanut Games, which had rebranded to These Nuts Games, has now closed shop, is not supporting the development of the games anymore. And then that kind of reminded me that I invested in that company a while ago.
I remember, yeah, I saw that and I was like, I'm pretty sure you're an investor in that.
But I had no idea what happened. So basically, I went to my message history on X, where the last thing I saw was that I signed the SAFT. And then we had a Telegram chat, but I wasn't able to find the Telegram chat. But then I found another Telegram chat with the founder and a friend of mine. And I actually realized that they refunded me. They refunded me and the other chaos that got in the last round. So I didn't lose money on that. And I was surprised to see that, but quite happy, quite pleased with myself.
Look, I mean, I've got two very important questions. One is less important than the other. In fact, one is not important at all, but it is kind of funny. The first one is a serious question, which is like, do you think in what like did they refund you because they decided to refund you, or did you as an early investor reach out to them at some point because you noticed something was off and ask for a refund? Because we've been through a couple of things actually. I can't remember if it's one or two teams. Two teams I've been refunded by personally. And this is just insight for people who may be doing this for the first time or would like to be involved in angel investing at some point. Like, look, obviously there's an amount of risk that you know that you take on as an angel investor when a team is going to attempt to execute whatever. But there's also like things which you might consider a complete breach of the trust that you come on. And so there were two instances. One where, for me, the team basically closed shop. Like they just completely closed up, and so they provided the refund back. In that instance, that was like a less controversial one. But there was a second one where we had to kind of say, do you know what? I think this is not working out because of the way we were being communicated with. And there was to the extent that we thought there was like a breach in the style of communication. So curious how this one worked out for you. And maybe if I just throw in the other question, like, was it anything to do with this name change? Was it such an egregious name change for you that you thought I can't attach the legendary brand to DeesNuts.plc or whatever?
So on that note, in that
Did you
case,
invest in D's Nuts, or did you invest in the previous?
I invested in Peanut Games. I invested in the pre-D's Nuts time.
Nice.
They did reach out themselves to me. It's the only round where it's the only round where I invested in where the founders reached out to me to say, look, we didn't manage to close enough interest in that round, so we think the fairest thing is to refund everyone. That was,
okay,
quite the good move on them. But in terms of hilarious names, this reminds me of the one story. I will never forget that. The first time I did the taxes for my LLC that also has some crypto exposure to it, I did it with basically a traditional tax advisor, not with my crypto specialist, because the company does other things as well. And I wanted to kind of explain him what's happening. It was back in the Nifty Gateway days. Company did some flips of art there, and he basically tried to understand it from a perspective. Okay, this is just like a real piece of art. You're buying that and you're selling it to someone else who buys it for more money. Like, yep, this is exactly what's happening. And I had Etherscan open. I just went through the things with him. It was a time when you could already like export your stuff from Nifty Gateway and put it in your own wallet. And then he's like, okay, let's look at this artwork. And he literally says, like, let's look at this transaction on Etherscan. I click on it. And then it was a flip. I don't remember what the artwork was, but the buyer was bigdick.eth, bigdick.something.eth. And my tax advisor was like, okay, so you're telling me that this big dick person basically bought this for 10K more than you bought it like 1 hour ago. I'm like, yep, this is how we are operating in this space. And that
just makes me think of you've seen the meme with the little Pepe, where like holding this tax accountant paper. Yeah. Same shit.
Yeah, exactly. That was the vibe.
Wow. Okay. Well, look, at least you got your money back. That's one of the things. And, commiserations to the people who got caught in this. I think this is ultimately going to happen a bunch of times, right? ICOB's been quite good on reporting on the variety of teams that are kind of slow rugging or kind of, coming up with excuses and disappearing. And the thing is, I have some sympathy sometimes with this stuff because it's not always the case that teams are going to be, in fact, 9 times out of 10, these teams are not going to be successful because that's the very nature of angel investing. So there's got to be a healthy way for people to fail. Maybe it's just around the comms and how to do that, and people feel respected and that you tried your best, and maybe that works out better. And maybe sometimes people feel like people are being deceptive, and that's where the anger comes from. But I do think there's got to be a healthy space for healthy room for people to fail because they're trying to do risky stuff in a pretty unforgiving space. Like one of the things we were talking about today with some of the people in the Blast ecosystem, we went to the Blast lunch, myself and Brad, and like we were talking to builders there who like have obviously gone through like quite a lot. Remember like the complete hype cycle that the whole Blast ecosystem experienced for a few months, and then it like kind of went quiet, right? And so these sometimes there are legitimately things which teams have absolutely no control over, and it just completely affects them, and then they need to try to navigate, and sometimes they can't like change the wind from the sails. So Brad, I think you want to come in.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to think of what that process is. Nothing special.
Yeah.
But on a more serious, I think one of the things we've seen as investors is that deals can change very significantly after you invested. Terms can change quite significantly after you invested. And there's one company that I invested in. I don't know if you invested in as well, B. And the first thing they changed is the vesting. They had obviously a lot of sell pressure, so they extended the vesting for everyone. And now, very recently, as a couple of days ago, they introduced another change that I think is quite significant. They basically make the investors take a decision of either going on as usual on the already like extended vesting schedule, or taking a roughly 50% discount on the outstanding tokens that have not been vested yet, and getting them all at some point next month. And the thing is, the way that they structured that is, if you don't specifically opt out of that, you will be converted to get cut by 50% of your unvested tokens and receiving them at some point next month. So I don't know. I find this a bit weird.
Is there no like legal recourse to that? Like obviously it's there's a contract in place. Like have they built in the ability to wiggle in other conditions as they see fit? Or I mean, I guess because I know Blast itself had that same instance where Blur investors didn't have the thing that they wanted.
I think they have this clause. However, I'm thinking with the other thing, when you basically say you take a 50% haircut and you get all of your tokens all of a sudden, or you continue as usual, and the way they make it is like an active opt-out mechanism. So if you don't opt out, you will be changed. Your terms will be changed. That seems, I mean, I'm by no means a legal expert, but that just seems a bit weird to me from a contractual perspective.
But I mean, you guys signed like that SAFT agreement at the very outright, like on the onset, had clear terms in it, right? And you're talking about them modifying, adding things. Like, did they give themselves wiggle room to be able to adjust things after the fact? Or
yes.
So that was in the original.
Okay. But typically, like when something changes, you get a notice and you need to opt in. Like I know that with every contract, whether it's my smartphone or whatever, and they adjust prices, like I have to opt in or I can like leave that, and they flip it on the head. And that, appeared a bit at least unusual to me.
Yeah, I mean, it might be the case that some people build in some flexibility, but I'm pretty certain when I've reviewed some of these SAFs, like there's some illegal stuff going on, and I think maybe 7 times out, maybe even 10 times out of 10 for some of them, like if investors are up, can they be bothered to like go after these teams that are like doing? Because this is the thing, when it comes to legal stuff, there's one thing having rules, and then there's a whole thing about enforceability. Like people talk about enforceability when it comes to law. It's like, look, you can have the rules set up and have very clear agreements. Then what happens when someone breaks them? If one party breaks the rules, what are you going to do? And in the end, if you don't have the time, effort, funds to go after the person, then it doesn't really matter. So, maybe some of them are chancing it and they think they can get away with it. And if there's no appetite from investors to go on that battle in maybe jurisdictions that are pretty obscure, right? A lot of these things are set up in British Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands, and whatever. So, if you want to fight the battle, you can fight it, or you can just get on with your life and, listen to our show. Interesting chat. I think we will see more of this stuff, and we will continue to discuss it as we consider it relevant. Let's get into this other tweet, which I thought was very, very interesting today. I was actually telling Brad about this one just an hour or so ago. Let me just find it. This is about the you've got it, Legendary. Do you want to actually? I can't see it, Legendary, because of the way I can.
Let me take it nonetheless. So this is a post by Jedi Wolf saying that in the last 2 years,
Jedi Wolf. This is one of the biggest XCOPY collectors. Huge whale.
Wonderful. In the last 2 years, ETH has lost over 50% of its value to BTC. Punks have lost 85% of the value to ETH. One floor punk in 2021 was 9 BTC. One CryptoPunk in 2024 is 1.2 BTC. Looks like a good buy in both USD and BTC terms. I can't imagine an NFT bull without punks surging. I'll revisit this in 1 to 2 years.
I think this is really interesting. Like, I don't think people have had the time to process how these like very significant assets have kind of moved with each other. And I don't know, I was actually pretty shocked. And that's why I wanted to bring this up to get your reaction to it, Legendary, and hear what Brett thought as well. But it's like one floor punk in 2021 was the equivalent of 9 Bitcoin. And obviously we're always talking about punks in ETH, so we don't really think about it like that. But one CryptoPunk in 2024 is 1.2 Bitcoin. Like, that's crazy when you think about the punks Bitcoin chart, which obviously no one ever thinks about, but like the strength of Bitcoin relative to these other things is like super interesting to me. So how do you react to that? And then also, do you have any like knock-on consequential thoughts about this type of ratio here?
Yeah, absolutely. I had this discussion with you. I had this discussion with Ignas, DeFi researcher. And I told you, like, it's the first time that I feel like that. I bought ETH at $11 8 years ago. And for the first time, I feel like maybe I should shift more into BTC and have a bit less conviction on that. Then we said, BTCFi is making BTC more interesting. You raised the point that BTCFi might play out on ETH. And that's certainly the bet that Coinbase is taking with CBBTC. And then I think I had the convo with Ignas as well. And Ignas was like, maybe ETH's purpose is to end up being an L2 for BTC and facilitating BTCFi. So it's a very good ratio to think about, the punks BTC one, that is. But something is definitely, has changed for me and has made me think to shift, because the majority of my portfolio is obviously on ETH and not on BTC, but to definitely revisit those allocations.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm certainly wondering, Brad, I shared this with you earlier as well. What were you thinking?
Sarah, you were sharing what with me? That you're looking at them too.
Yeah. I'll share that as well. But like your general headline thoughts on like this ratio stuff and like the strength of Bitcoin. What are you thinking?
I mean, if we're talking specifically about buying NFTs, I don't want NFTs in an uptrending market, not as a long-term buy, because in my opinion, I think history has shown, right, the native asset is the thing that runs, and then it hits a point where it kind of stagnates and goes lateral and chops, whatever, and then people start scrambling for the NFTs. So I feel like if you're buying anything now in what I consider an uptrending market, it's 60% up over the last, whether you can look at the big three or even exclude them. We're up 67% over the last, year-ish. I consider it an uptrending market. I think it'll continue to uptrend. I don't want NFTs in that environment because I feel like what's going to lead is going to be Bitcoin. What's going to lead is going to be Solana. What's going to lead is going to be Ethereum, whether it's like leading those other two or not, doesn't matter. And then as that thing crescendos, people will scramble for these other assets. So I don't want to hold that other asset while the leader is going to be the native asset, because then it's going to outpace me. And so, yeah, I think about that as a bag holder of a lot of NFTs and how I'm going to eventually get out of those things and or rotate to other things. Just historically, it's the native asset leads, and at the peak of that, everyone scrambles for. That's when like the apes were over 100 ETH a piece or whatever, or punks. Whenever they got to that level, it was at basically the tippity top of Ethereum. So I don't like, if you're buying NFTs now, native asset's going to run, and then they're going to come for you, and then maybe you can get more ETH. And yeah, that's just not my thing. So no NFTs for bread going into an uptrending market.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, why were we having this conversation then where you felt like kind of tempted as well? Like, what is the temptation with a punk? Is that just more? Is that more of a attachment to the culture and like thinking that they're cool, not thinking about it from the investment side?
Yeah, I mean, I want one, but I also want to maximize when I get the thing, right? It's like I don't want to overpay for the thing right now, or if our time horizon is within the next, year or two. So I want one. I'm watching one. I don't want one now. Whenever we get to the top, and I think things are getting wild, and yeah, maybe when on the way back down, sure, I'll diversify and grab a few things, but just right now, I don't think it's an advantageous position to be in. So, and there's no, I'm not going anywhere, right? So there is no hurry to get in.
Okay. Fair enough. I think that's very fair. I'm still tempted at it now because I really like the. Do you know what happened though? This is what happened for me. People might find this interesting. I found this new podcast called Founders. It's similar in vibe to Acquired, which Legendary, me and you've been speaking about as like a great business story podcast. This podcast called Founders kind of dives into the histories of some successful people in the past and tries to link the defining and quality the defining qualities of those people and draw out similarities and figure out why they were so successful. And there's 2 episodes on the art market and people who've been involved in art. And one episode is on Gagosian, who's like the guy like right now who's one of the biggest gallery people and collectors and kind of kingmakers. And there was another one on a guy before him who apparently Gagosian took all of his inspiration from. I'm trying to find the name because it was kind of a cool name, but I cannot find it in my list at the moment. I'll keep scrolling and trying to find it. But just the idea that these digital assets. I mean, and maybe it's so obvious in hindsight, and we've spoken about this before, but the money is infinite in a way, isn't it? And we experience that on the dollar side with the infinite printing, and kind of experiencing it on the ETH side with the infinite dumping at the moment from like various large parties. But these digital assets are specifically scarce. And I saw a good point about this, might have been by Punk's OTC, saying like, what's the real estimation? I don't think really people really talk about this. What's the real estimation of all the punks that are lost? Like old wallets that minted this stuff and just never came back to it. And now those are all out of circulation. So I know people talk about them being 10K. How many really are in circulation? I'd love to know like a closer number there.
But I mean, it's demand that matters, not scarcity, right? Because we have tons of things that are limited to single digits, like total. But just because something is scarce doesn't make it valuable. You have to have demand. I do think punks have demand, which is why I want one. I think they're a cultural asset, and I think they will ultimately on a long enough time horizon that they will probably transcend a lot of the current numbers. But like the time horizons for stuff like that to appreciate and actually become an artifact or a cultural asset is you're talking potentially decades, right? So yeah, I like just because it's like scarcity as a value prop, I think is something that I've been reflecting on a lot recently because that's something that we inject across the board inside of crypto. Everyone is doing this artificial scarcity shit because they think because it's scarce it has value, but you need demand on the thing, right? It's Bitcoin's value prop, right? They just say, oh, it's scarce, therefore it has a value. That's not the case with everything. So I don't know. I like my eyes kind of glaze over when I hear like, oh, there's only that's the same shit. It reminds me of the NFT craze whenever you would sit there and see like the person that comes along and goes, oh, there's only 3 total pink hat, blue-eyed squirrel tails in the entire collection, and that's why it's valuable because there's only 3 of them. And it's like, no, you need 3 people. Like you need people to want the fucking combination that you just did. So like, yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I definitely take that point. It needs to be the combination of demand and supply. Legendary, one's coming to you here. What's the maybe final take on this before we get into today's headlines?
Yeah, final take is exactly the extrapolation that Brett did. It takes multiple decades to really appreciate as an asset. And then the question becomes, over a period of multiple decades, does that outperform compounded interest in the S&P 500, or does it outperform the leader? Does it outperform BTC? And I personally would feel more comfortable in, holding, if my horizon is 20 or 30 years or 10 years for that to appreciate, I'd personally feel more comfortable to be in the S&P 500 or to hold BTC rather than betting on the punk appreciation to outperform that. And then Overarch also made the comment on the YouTube side of things saying you'll miss out on potentially humongous gains not bidding NFTs. Execution risk works both ways. And that is my thing. If NFT is trend, I'd rather bid on a new collection that is getting the hype and be like in and out of that within a couple of days and having this super long investment thesis on something that is as culturally relevant as the punks, which they certainly are. But just from an investment standpoint, I personally am not convinced that they are the best thing you can do with your money. Again, being part of the community, being part of the events is completely separate to that. I'm just looking purely at APY numbers.
Okay. I'd probably take the other side of that, but I think that's been made clear already. Let's keep it moving today and get into today's headlines. Legendary, which one should we take first? Should we hit the main stuff from Reuters? Do you have that one up, and do you want to just take us through the basics here of what happened with the rate cut and how we think markets have responded?
Yeah, absolutely. Reuters has title on that: a Fed outsays rate cut draws muted reaction, but the calm may not last. And we've seen basically that split on the expectation whether we'll see a 50 bips or a 25 bips rate cut. It turned out to be a 50 basis points rate cut. That is unusually large for the Fed, and it's also been the first rate cut in quite some time. And we have a quote there by Brian Jacobson, who's the chief economist at NX Wealth Management, a company that is overseeing a bit more than 5 billion assets. And he's saying the calm, I think, is not going to last, pointing out to a reversal in equities late in the day that could set the market up for weakness in stocks unless and until we get some data giving us a clear sense of the direction. When we're speaking about this muted reaction, what does that mean? Stock options had priced in a roughly 1.1% swing up or down for the S&P 500. But by the close of the trading, the index had snapped a 7-day winning streak to finish down 0.29% and reversing some of those earlier gains. As we said, on the crypto side of things, the market definitely did react in a way more positive way, in a stronger way to that, not only in the majors. I think that some of the memes also, especially PopCat, had a very green day on that. So the reaction of the market,
right? That's the line everyone draws. Like the Fed cut rates, therefore the cat pops. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, right? So this is basically the split reaction between TradFi and our Web3 ecosystem in terms of the price action.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting how. Remember how we had that little period of time where memes were actually like really attached to crypto majors, and like when majors went up, they just kind of went the same amount. When they went down, they also only went down a certain amount. So I don't know. It feels bottomy. Well, maybe not PopCat now, which is back up to, I don't know, 85 cents or something in that region, much higher than it was before. But yeah, I'm kind of watching that in a way, but I'm kind of more thinking along the lines of Bitcoin and punks, to be honest. I can't get over this punk situation. After I listened to one podcast about like these 20th century art dealers and how they bought up, and just a final point on the supply, they bought up like all the supply and like really controlled the supply. And I'm like, oh, that is the way to do it. Just all of these punks are off the market. I just need a punk. I'm kind of obsessed by it. Brad, you had some criticism.
No, you know what I was thinking about whenever, because obviously Legendary's last comment on it were like, oh, if you're buying it for the actual like returns on the thing, maybe not the most move or the thing that has the most conviction in, which is like then it had me. So it had me questioning what was my motivation for wanting the punk. And I know we had referred to him as cultural assets before. I don't know that I don't want a punk because I want to make money on the punk. I want the punk because I'm so ingrained in this ecosystem that I kind of want it, which kind of I believe that's the case why I want it. And I think that kind of signals that it actually is a cultural asset on some level, because I kind of want one of those things. I feel like they're directly tied to our ecosystem, and they have significance in it. And it's not strictly for like, I think it's going to outpace the BTC Punk pair over the next 3 years. Like that, I'm not interested at all in playing that game. I'm interested in like, I'm here. I want to have a piece of something that I think signifies that I'm here and I'm like serious about all this shit. And like, I just want to punk for that reason.
Fair enough. And I think that's probably the best way to go into purchasing these types of very expensive things, right? Like going in with it for the right reasons is probably the smarter move.
Yeah, and that also determines how much of your portfolio you're willing to you're willing to allocate or risk on something like this. Because like, yes, obviously I'd like it to go lateral up, like awesome. That would be great. But like it would have to be with a smaller percentage of my portfolio than native assets, because those things I do want to go up, and I'm fairly confident they will go up. I'm willing to risk that on a 5%, 10%, whatever on your actual portfolio for that.
Yeah, that's
Fair
such a
enough.
good point, because I feel like if you spend more than 50% of your net worth in a single asset, that's not a healthy thing to do. Also see Funky with his hand up on the conversation. Funky, my friend, welcome to the stage. What are your thoughts on that?
GM fam, yeah. I mean, I appreciate Bread's aspirational take on the punks, and I just hope he doesn't change his PFP. He's got to keep rocking these custom
Never.
bread things.
Never.
And I wanted to just touch on the 50 BPS thing. We had a really interesting and engaging sort of argument in the kingdom yesterday about this whole 50% or 50 BPS cut. And how this is kind of bearish. And I dropped it in the comments below, but Arthur Hayes had a great take. You know, he's always talking about Lord Satoshi in his essays. And then if you look at his feed, he also talked about we got to watch JPY, how much that responds to it. Because historically, and you probably remember this, Legendary, you're a big data guy, every time there's been a rate cut, it's preceded a recession. Right. So you think about when the rates started coming down in the 80s from Volcker, you think about the 90s when there was the recessionary dip, they had to cut rates. You think about them cutting the rates at the end of the dot-com bubble bursting. You think about them cutting the rates at the 2009, at the sort of the financial crisis that precipitated, you know. So all of these things are indicative of that there may be a change in trend. And everybody, just to your point, thinks it's insta bullish. But we have to kind of wait for the other shoe to drop, because the next few days and weeks are going to tell us a lot in terms of the data and what this means for the market. Because as in the thing I linked from an interview with CoinDesk with Hayes, that was just from a day ago, he said that this 50% or the 50 BPS markdown in the rates is, to, I think his exact words were something about the global rot of the financial system. And so that this could be much bigger in a negative way that we don't really anticipate, because at the end of the day, whichever candidate comes in, whoever wins the election, they're going to spend more money. They're only making the problem worse because inflation never really hit its target. So I don't think it's necessarily bullish. And now I'm kind of cautiously optimistic that we still have a traditional bull run, but there's a lot to be seen. And I don't want people to get out there and get hurt because they're all of a sudden max longing and they think, oh, it's only going to go up. So I think that's just a responsible thing I want to inject into the conversation.
Yeah, that's a very great perspective. I'm also currently sharing this article on screen. Thank you, Funky, for bringing that up. And Hayes is also going to touch on another point, saying that he thinks the most important macroeconomic variable is the dollar-yen exchange rate, and that is, the dollar exchange rate weakened a lot because the BOJ cut rates at zero negative, and the Fed and every other major central bank raised rates starting in March of 2022. That differential is widening a lot. And then he continues to say, if the Fed's going to do 25 or 50 or however many base points, it's going to go down. And now in the subsequent meetings, it's going to continue to narrow that differential. Dollar yen will continue to strengthen. The yen strengthens, the actual nominal value goes down, and people continue to unwind positions, which removes leverage from the system. Stocks go down, and I think yields go up. I think crypto sort of TBD.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Funky and Legendary, for like bringing out some of the key information. The headline there was actually even more inflammatory in a way, and maybe just to present that so people can go off and read further into this, because we're not going to dive into this even more than what we've just said. Just to make you aware of some important perspectives, said if they go 50, that will be a nuclear catastrophe for financial markets. That's a quote in CoinDesk from that conversation with Arthur Hayes. So I see what people mean. Like, this is not, I know everyone was like super excited about rate cuts, and then everyone can just go up only as a consequence. But I think there's some clear underlying weaknesses in the economy where people are struggling in general. So I don't know if it's as straightforward as we would like it to be. We'll keep monitoring it, keep bringing you the information so that you can try and make your own informed decisions as we experience it. Let's keep it moving for now, though, and maybe go to the next headline, Legendary, which is, what's the next headline?
The Solana Saga. Solana Mobile has received 70 mil worth in pre-orders for the next phone, the Seeker. That again is 5 times the demand for the Saga phone. Growth is massively driven from the Asia Pacific demographic, with over half the sales coming from that region. And CoinDesk specified it's called, as we said, Seeker. Will have a major hardware improvement over the first phone, better battery, stronger camera, lighter design. I think when the first one came out, it received, just from a phone perspective, just very, very terrible reviews.
Yes.
But again, from an Android perspective, it's very, very glad I bought that phone. Very sad I didn't buy multiples of them.
Okay, so there's definitely the phone element here, which is like, okay, apparently this is going to be a better phone. That's cool. But I guess the way I was going to think about it, but I wanted to hear Brett's thoughts as well. But one of the ways I was thinking about it was like, what's this kind of focus on mobile? Like, one of the conversations we were having today at the Blast lunch as well was about how everyone is being more mobile, and for a long period of time, crypto is stuck in this weird desktop browser thing extension, which is incredibly bad UX. Even if you're on a computer, frankly, like if we're being completely honest, even as a thing that you do on your computer, it's bad UX. Everyone's on their mobile, but crypto hasn't been able to swap over. So, you know, there seems to be legit demand for this. Maybe people are farming an airdrop by buying the phone. Maybe that's always a part of it. But Brad, what are you thinking about this kind of focus on mobile from Solana? Is that the future, and are they ahead of Ethereum as a consequence?
I'm going to hold this just to give your arm a break. This thing's pretty heavy. Okay, so first of all, reminder of what so I'm surprised they're actually doing a second phone. A reminder of the original phone, although it was successful after they started realizing people could airdrop to it and bonked it and everyone else, whatever, was basically entirely because for our industry to branch into the mobile world, you have to take advantage of hardware, right? It's called the secure enclave, where you can store this information that is like the private key associated to a wallet. And to have access to that stuff, you have to basically build your own phone, because yes, Apple would do it. Yes, Google could do it, but they have no incentive to actually utilize this thing to store your information so that you can actually do or sign proper transactions on chain with a mobile phone. Like the only way to do that is to get permission from them. They wouldn't grant it to us because they have no incentive to do that thing. So the Solana mobile phone was meant as a way to force their hand, create this thing, show there's demand, and then eventually they will say, okay, we will also give access to the secure enclave to allow you to store your shit and do whatever. I had thought that Apple had already started showing signs that they were giving developers access to that to allow for people to actually start having these kind of applications. So knowing that, I'm surprised that they're actually launching into a second iteration, because totally straight up said, that's why we're doing the phone, not to be a successful mobile company, not to actually make money on this thing, but to force the hand of large players so that it progresses our industry. Whatever they play, they show there's demand there. So I'm surprised that they're doing it for that reason, because I had thought they were signaling that some of the larger players are actually doing, but it's good. And you know, it's competition. I think competition always serves end users. So awesome.
Just real quick on that to maybe break that down a bit more from the technical standpoint with the secure part of that. Basically, what Solana, the Saga, is doing is the Web3 component of it, the seed phrase private key, is stored on a separate part of the phone, on a separate encrypted part of the phone, in such fashion that it's not really connected to the rest of the operating system, which means it cannot be hacked, and the seed phrase, the private key, cannot be extracted. And there's been a case, I think a week or two ago, that was actually quite impressive from the hacker's perspective, of someone with an Android phone. So when on Android you install an app, you either do that from the Play Store, or you can just download the APK file and install it yourself. And this is exactly what happened. And that person installed an APK that was hit with a malicious, with a malware on there. And that was a pretty smart malware, because what it did is it went through all of the pictures, and it looked for seed phrases in the pictures, and it was actually able, from like a handwritten, seed phrase that someone took a picture of, to extract the words, and steal this guy's basically access to the wallet and
That's
steal
really
the
fucking
crypto on it.
impressive. Yeah, imagine you have
Just
to do some like smart analysis. Yeah, some like AI
that's
analysis
basically
on the
it.
actual
It's
images.
exactly using what Open AI can do, using what other tools can do, just extract text from images and snipe your seed phrase. And this is exactly where this can't be on the same part of the operating system than the rest of it, because that would not be a secure procedure.
Crazy. Got to be careful with the stuff, for sure. Interesting stuff. Thanks for that analysis, guys. Both Legendary and Bread, particularly insightful there. Let's look, before we get to the final headline, let's do the Web3 roundup to get you up to speed with everything else that's been happening in the space in the last 24 hours. Number one, Helios Labs raises $21.75 million to build out their infrastructure on Solana. Next, airdrops to Solana Mobile 2, the second one, decrease in price from $40K to $100 with Airship tool developed by Helios. Some tech developments there, making the cost of airdropping significantly cheaper. Sky Protocol announces points program. Remember, this is formerly MakerDAO, announces a points program for Chronicle Labs where users can supply USDS for Chronicle points. And this is a good one. We might have some more news on this tomorrow. ApeCoin DAO funds creator with $210,000 to ride in a custom BMW for 3 years. Legendary, maybe you can do a little quick piece on that just before we move on in a moment, before we speak about it more tomorrow. Fair Warning Art, on the art side, this is pretty cool. Fair Warning Art, hyper-curated auction platform for fine digital art by the famous art mastermind. The NFT in question is Lava Labs' Autoglyph. The Loic Gauzer, I think that's pronounced correctly, made history as the mastermind of the Da Vinci Salvador Mundi auction, which closed at $450 million. And this person has chosen to do 2 to 4 monthly auctions, basically, of these types of pieces. And they're choosing digital assets. So that is pretty interesting from the digital art side. Parallel reveal exclusive first look at upcoming third-person shooter. That's obviously a very anticipated game on the Web3 side. And finally, Singapore car app Grab. We've been using this all the time over here. Sends notifications on PayPal USD. Apparently, they also create a crypto wallet for every end user built on Polygon. This is what adoption looks like. That's the Web3 roundup from everything else that's been happening in the space in the last 24 hours. Legendary, do you want to do a quick comment on the ApeCoin DAO thing? And then before you lead us into the final headline.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, it was a proposal in the ApeCoin DAO by a friend of mine, Kodama, who had initially formulated that a while ago with the idea to get a car, get a Porsche back then, for 3 years, have that custom foiled and branded with ApeCoin, and after 3 years, sell the car with the proceeds going back to the DAO, and represent the car at ApeFest, drive that around, create content for 3 years. And basically, his payment would be that he gets to enjoy the car for free over the next 3 years. If you do the math and actually break that down and assume that the car will have a discount of like 30 to 40% and lose that much value in the next 3 years, it's not that bad. It's 2.5K per month. And the first time it didn't pass, it was actually voted in favor for until the last couple of minutes when a dormant address woke up and voted against it with a couple million ape. And this time it passed. It passed a couple of hours ago. And the interesting thing to me was that Mocha Ape DAO was against it. They used the full stack of 6 million ape to vote against it. But nonetheless, Kodama, who is pretty influential in the ape ecosystem, to be fair, he founded the Mega Coders, owns 2 Mega Coders himself. They also voted with more than 1 million ape on that issue themselves. Managed to pass it. And we will have him on the show tomorrow to hear basically a bit more on that story from the source.
The one thing I've said about this stuff before we hit the final headline is I think DAO politics is interesting. I know a lot of people in this space will say that traditional politics is boring and they want to get away from that. You can't get away from politics when there's money involved, and particularly with DAO structures, there will be politics. And I think I remember saying this months ago, maybe even can't say a year ago, at least many months ago on the show, ApeCoin DAO was maybe one of the first, but there will be others, especially particularly ones that are NFT first focused, and those communities will make politics interesting again, because politics is interesting. It is interesting. It's just people feel so disenfranchised that they feel like they can't make a difference. And even in these instances, sometimes, when you see Animoca or whichever corporate wallet or whoever voting down something that it appears that the majority of the community want, that might be disheartening for the average creator, the average participant potentially. But on the flip side, how interesting is that look, the first one didn't go through, the second time that corporate account maybe voted against it again, but the will of the kind of the will of the masses in that instance actually overcame and was more powerful in that instance. I think there was something to do with the commercial relationship potentially, where the first one was for a Porsche, this one was for a BMW. So a BMW is better than a Porsche because Yuga Labs have got a stronger, an official relationship with BMW. So maybe that's even a little bit of an element. I don't know. But I do think there's something about DAOs that, they were spoken about a couple of years ago, probably as the thing that was going to change the way that people work. I don't think it will change the way that people work, but I do think it will become far more interesting to get funded via those routes in the next couple of years.
My brain was totally elsewhere. I was thinking about how we've spent all this time in the Blast event, and you talked about this mobile first thing, and you didn't touch on it. I think that's some alpha that that actual direction might be worth going into. Just to steal the last headline, that was going through my head just now. Nothing on Kodama.
Okay. I was wondering how much we're allowed. I think he said no one was allowed to video the.
Yeah, people tweeting about it. I already saw it.
Okay, so yeah, maybe we'll do a little segment on it tomorrow potentially.
Yeah.
We'll carve out some time tomorrow. We were not allowed to video the presentation
Sauce.
The presentation, the source that Pac-Man distributed, because he was there and gave a little bit of a speech. It was very interesting, but yeah, we'll share some more tomorrow, I think. Legendary, we've just got a couple minutes left. Do you want to just touch on the final headline, get people up to speed, and then we'll close out?
Let's do the last headline. Garga had a bit of an additional context on Top Trader, which I think which is very relevant. So it is a simulation game. Top Trader is not, you don't trade with 1000x leverage and lose generational wealth. He's very specific about that, saying it's a fully on-chain trading simulation game with minimum 100x leverage. It's kind of a blast, and the only way you'll ever touch 1000x leverage without bankrupting your family for generations. What's the idea behind that? Garga sees it as an elegant demo of the tools that anyone has available to build on ApeChain. And basically the workshop built TT as a fully on-chain game using a portal for tournament buy-ins from other chains. And that's probably the idea there, that you will have trading challenges where you will be able to win actually real prizes. Yuga ID for seamless account abstraction, gas-sponsored transactions, and Reboot, because they had that partnership with the protocol that came out of the Pixelot ecosystem to manage the tournament rewards.
No one cares about fake money. If this is truly just like a way to demonstrate the tech, there's a lot of things you can do to demonstrate the tech that just straight up aren't used across a lot of blockchains. So I'm bearish if that is the real intent.
I'd agree, but look at the success of the fantasy top tournaments. Like I don't play them, but small buy-in, you can win something. People play them. Seneca plays.
It's not.
Yeah,
it's
but
not
there's a tournament. But there's a tournament where you will be able to win stuff. And it will follow the same principle. I assume you will have a buy-in, you will be able to win money. Otherwise, I'd agree. If it's just fake gambling on a demo casino account, boring. But if there's real money to be made, which there certainly will be, it's a nice demo to have.
Okay. Well, I think that's definitely fair. And Yuga are pretty good at putting something in the prize pool to get people excited. I think they also announced, just as a final thing, Dookie Dash going live tomorrow, potentially, and I believe there's a pretty healthy prize pool there too. So we'll keep reporting on all of those things. As Legendary said, special guest tomorrow, Kodama, the recipient of one fantastic new BMW Bored Ape. We will have some questions for him for sure. Thanks to Legendary for sorting that out. And thank you for joining us as always. Remember, we do this live every single day, Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern time. We're live on X. We're live on X video and YouTube video as well if you want to catch us live. Spotify and Apple Podcasts for catching up if you prefer us over there. Thank you to my legendary co-host, Legendary and Bread. And thank you guys for joining us. Funky as a contributor as usual. Take care. Have a wonderful day. And we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.